Good evening, night, morning, when we find a way to watch or listen to this podcast. It's me, Omar, again from Hardware. Jackson is back from his honeymoon. I'm happy to say, or I shouldn't say that. I don't want his wife to be mad at me for saying that. But he's back from his honeymoon, so we will be recording tomorrow night. That'll be out later this week. We'll be back to doing the weekly previews. But now, you guys loved the Northeast Conference Alignment talk so much from my friend John Paul Glowatz, so much that we brought him back, and it just seems like the universe liked it so much that they through another Northeast Conference realignment scenario right in our laps to talk about. Before we talk about it, John, how's everything going?
Everything's good, Omar. Well, we won't get into the finer points of where Delaware falls on the Northeast or not scale, but yeah, realignment seems to be blessing us with a with another go around here with Delaware.
Exactly. I mean, Mason-Dixon line savants, please turn away. Whether you consider Delaware a North state or not does not matter here. We're considering it a Northeastern state slash territory area, Commonwealth, actually, Northeastern Commonwealth, I think. But Delaware has professed their, in sort of, I wouldn't even call it, I'll call it a manifesto to be funny, in sort of a manifesto against the CAA. They've expressed their dissatisfaction, and it seems like the straw that broke the camel's back was Bryant. So consider Doug Eddert, former St. Peter's great and now Bryant great, as being the breaking point for two monumental college events. But they've expressed their dissatisfaction with the CAA for a number of reasons with how expansion went, and also too with their media deal. And now they want to go FBS, but unfortunately, it looks like that bubble has kind of popped at this moment. So, John, I want to know your thoughts on Delaware, just this whole situation.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm all for the moving up. I don't necessarily share the same sentiments with their displeasure with Bryant, and some were saying Hampton as well. Obviously, I'm a Hampton diehard. Shout out to my nephew David Stevens. Uh, but we've been talking about this for years about a potential Northeast League or at least a scheduling alliance or something like that. So I'd be all for Delaware moving up. I think they haven't had amazing success on the field at the FCS level recently, although they have in the past. So they're a big enough school. I think they could hold their own with either a G5 conference or this kind of zombie, Big East Yankee, A10, whatever this thing ends up forming into. So selfishly, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for it too. I'm all for the ballooning of FBS membership. I mean, I'm all for schools getting a shot. In the article I wrote detailing, I guess, Delaware's case for Conference USA, their fit. I said Conference USA was the Ellis Island of FBS college football, where teams, they see the Statue of Liberty and they arrive at Ellis Island and they receive new hope and versions of the American dream. When that American dream is just living 10 deep, in a tenement house in New York City. That's Conference USA. That's just Conference
That's not
USA.
right.
That's the football version of that. But I'm all for it as well. But I mean, I want to make one statement, and I don't want to. I just think Delaware's statement is in poor taste. Because one, those schools are just on their way up and everything. They're just trying to do what's best for them. But also too, it's like the statement of Hampton kind of strikes a nerve with me because Delaware is a school that it was very well publicized, avoided playing Delaware State, their in-state compatriot, for years. They didn't play Delaware State until 2007. And when they finally happened to meet each other in the playoffs, that's what it took to get Delaware to play Delaware State. So I mean, I feel like that's just in poor taste, with all that context to say that about Hampton, a fine learning institution, a private institution, one of the Black Ivies, is just in poor taste by their leadership, and it's very tone deaf. That being said, not a personal attack on Delaware. They have a great program, great tradition. I think they would fit in well. I can see them being sort of like a James Madison in whichever league they fall in. I mean, we'll start off with what everyone thinks is pretty much the best fit for them. the MAC. I mean, I think I was thinking about it on the drive back from work. That I guess a Northeast Conference could work, but I think Temple's getting too much money to pull them away from the American. I think Navy and Army, with Army hopefully heading to the American, I think both of them are also receiving too much money for an upstart Northeast Conference to be a thing. You really need those three anchors in my eyes. But your thoughts on that, and then Delaware going to the MAC?
Yeah, so I mean, as I was saying a little bit, yeah, I don't see, I'd love to see a Northeast, conference or scheduling alignment, but yeah, I don't see Temple or Navy or Army, getting pulled away from the American. I think, all of this is timing. All of this is fluctuating. So whatever happens with if Delaware does move up and whatever conference they start out in is not, whatever conference they might end up in or be in for the long term. So, they just kind of need to get their feet wet, whether it be in the MAC, USA, even the Sun Belt potentially. So, yeah, I'm not too worried about where they start. It's more about where they finish. So that being said, uh, I like them for the MAC if they can get another team to kind of bridge the conference there. The MAC seems to be the one of the few conferences that has really done it well in terms of like the geographic footprint. I really love what the MAC has done. Like they're such a, kind of like a close knit conference. The rivalries there, the MACtion, it's what college sports should be, and particularly G5, or mid-major college sports, what it should be. So, I worry a little bit about losing that with adding, Delaware. I know they had UMass in the conference for years there, and obviously they didn't ruin things, but just having that close proximity is really important. So if they could pull a Marshall or a James Madison or somebody like that kind of gives them a bridge to more MAC territory, definitely more in favor of it. I don't think that probably happens. So I think in my estimation, I think the MAC is probably not going to be the fit for Delaware, but that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, in my eyes, I mean, I think they're the best fit. I'm not sure about the Sun Belt. If well, I mean, I didn't think about the Sun Belt, honestly. I thought the Sun Belt was set, and I felt like that the Sun Belt expanding into Delaware, which I mean we'll talk about more later, would have kind of hurt the conference more because now you have essentially a Conference USA that plays better football, but I mean there's just more stops along the way, stretching from Delaware all the way to Texas. But that being said, with the MAC, I mean something I want to raise a question to you. I mean you mentioned UMass in the past. UMass is in a very tenuous situation football wise. Do you think they'd be willing to sacrifice the strength of A10 basketball for life in the MAC to save football? And again, like I mentioned the last time we did this, I know you said rumors of the A10's demise were premature, but I don't think it's looking too good for the A10. I love the A10 as a conference, but they were a one bid league last year, and I just think that this conference is kind of hurting. The golden days of the A10 are kind of, I wouldn't say far, but they're behind them.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting question for UMass. Certainly, what you say is true. The A10 basketball conference appears to be much more of a low major than a mid major these days. I don't I don't think I don't think UMass pulls the trigger to move back to the MAC because they'd have to move all of their sports. That was kind of the sticking point last go around. Is MAC did not want them to just stay for football only. So I think I think even though it might be a more financially lucrative decision for them, I think it's a tough sell as an athletic department to your fans to say, hey, I know this kind of didn't work out the first time around, but now we're going to do it again, and we're going to do it, full bore with all of our sports that would qualify. So I don't see it happening, but never say never.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the life of independence, it's tough for UMass for sure. But the way I feel like, I mean, I know UMass is big on basketball, but I guess they're kind of I feel like I won't say they're bad for this, but I feel like there's like no basketball program that hangs more or lingers more in the past than UMass does, and it's just such a short period of the past. Like the John Calipari era where they think they're a mid-major blue blood. And I mean those were great years, but you take the history of UMass basketball, and there's very little outside of that. Which I mean, I can't agree. It's hard when you have the rivalries like Rhode Island, St. Bonaventure. You name it in the A10, you trade that for Eastern Michigan, Northern Illinois, where it's like you have to manufacture excitement for these games. Not that those programs are bad, but it's just there's just no history, there's no geographic, there's no that sort of like Northeast like blue collar basketball pride at stake. So I mean, I would agree. I would like to see it. I'm kind of torn because as a college football fan, I'd love to see UMass in the conference, but as an A10 fan, I enjoy seeing UMass in that sort of tight knit or mostly tight knit geographic identity. So I definitely would have to agree.
No doubt.
But moving on to the other conference I originally mentioned, Conference USA, the Ellis Island of college football, which looks to be the more likely destination for Delaware. But my thing is with that is like, are things really that bad? Like, take your lumps and play Bryan and Hampton and Campbell. It's not going to hurt you. It's not going to hurt you, Delaware. It's that's really not a bad life. Um, because now, I mean, I as a person living in El Paso, I wouldn't mind seeing Delaware play in the Sun Bowl. It would be a very, very peculiar setting, seeing that a winged helmet of any type, whether it's Princeton, Michigan, or Delaware, play in the Sun Bowl stadium. But I'd be excited for it. But yeah, going from a conference that stretches all the way to El Paso to Delaware, it's not easy. I mean, I don't know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, like I said, not about where you start, but where you finish. I could definitely see Delaware making that move. It's not a terrible option if they can. Well, I imagine it's probably not going to be just football only. So this is, we're talking all sports. It is going to get kind of pricey, but I could see that happening for, eh, 5 years, something like that. Get the program up to FBS speed, and then, as we're saying, with Army, with Temple, with all these schools, we know the conference realignment wheel is going to keep spinning. So get your house in order 5 years, 7 years down the line, whenever the ACC pops, that kind of is going to trickle down to the G5 mid-major leagues and whatnot. So, then, have Delaware and everybody else ready to strike. And as I haven't looked at the numbers, but I got to believe that CUSA is a step up from the CAA in basketball as well. So, could they get maybe two bids in a year? And could Delaware elevate their basketball program as part of that? I'd definitely like to think that's probably on the AD's mind at Delaware as well.
Yeah, so it's funny you say that. I was about to ask that as part of the Conference USA question. You, of course, being a lot more so, the college basketball expert than I am. I did some research, and I feel like something that's lost when you have these moves from, I guess, between mid-major conferences is the NIT, and I'm an NIT diehard. Put it back in the garden. But that's neither here nor there in this discussion. But the NIT, doing some research, it's very lucrative. Well, not very, but I guess for a program like Delaware, it could be very lucrative. Where I guess participants get over 300,000 for participation in the NIT. And that's like nowhere close to the NCAA tournament, like of course. But that's a pretty hefty amount. Like that's honestly more than schools in the CAA get per year, I think, media wise with their media deal. But looking at the field, there were of course the championship game was essentially the Conference USA championship this year for the NIT. And then there were two teams that joined NIT or that joined Conference USA this year in the field with Liberty and Sam Houston. Um, I mean, all that being said, do you think the NIT is a pulling factor? I know I'm not being paid by the NIT to to argue its prowess, But do you think the NIT as a or access to it is a pulling factor?
Yeah, I mean, not just the NIT, but like, these athletic departments have to be considering every revenue stream, whether it's the NIT, whether it's, potential bowl games, whether, it's merchandise, and any sort of detractor from revenue stream, including obviously the major one being, travel cost, and anything else that might come with it. So, I definitely think the NIT and any other postseason, uh, revenue stream that they might be able to get their hands on is within consideration.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to agree, and I think the thing for that, like in comparison to the CAA, I mean, mentioning you mentioned it before, basketball wise, that's a conference that nearly saw a 31 win team miss out on the tournament, or a 30 win team miss out on the tournament. Like they would have made history in the wrong way. Talking about the College of Charleston, who had an amazing season, but they literally said that if they don't win the championship, they might not even make it. Fortunately, they did, and that pushed the Hofstra Pride to the NIT with the coveted automatic bid, winning the regular season title. So it all ended up well for the CAA, but that has to be in the back of Delaware's mind. Access to those postseason opportunities.
Yeah,
Go
yeah, and
or
just
go ahead, my bad.
my bad. But I guess I'll just continue since we're on the thread here. So I was just looking at barttorvik.com. So last year's numbers, CUSA was the 10th ranked conference in college basketball, just behind the WCC, and the CAA was the 23rd ranked conference. Now I know obviously there's going to be a lot of changes, with the realignment that we'll see for this year upcoming, and forget about years down the line. But I mean that's a pretty big difference from 10 to 23.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't think it was that big of a difference, to be honest with you. I would love to hear some of the conferences that are in between Conference USA and CA because I would have thought like five spots at most.
Yeah. So it goes WAC, A10, Ivy, Sun Belt, MVC, Big West, A Sun, Big Sky, MAC, SoCon, MAC with two A's, Big South, and then CAA.
Wow, so I mean, I just can't believe that both the Big South. I mean, I'm also surprised by the Ivy League like making it that high. Like, I guess
Ivy
good for
can
them
play some
for
ball.
that.
Ivy can play some
I
ball
know
for
they
sure.
can. I mean, I'm an Ivy truther, but like, wow, like the 12th ranked conference, like that's pretty amazing. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I
Must
mean that's just last year. So I don't know if we had a composite over, a 5 year, 10 year span, maybe things would be a little different. But
Yeah, so I mean that's very telling then in that case. And I guess it doesn't get better with, I guess it adding Hampton and Campbell, I guess for Delaware. I guess that's what they see in their eyes. I won't buy that. But moving on to I guess the last conference that would possibly be an option is the Sun Belt. And it seems like the Sun Belt set, I mean, they recognize that they have a good thing going. Like I mentioned before, stretching to Delaware kind of hurts the whole geographic footprint. Not, I mean, by a little bit, but you're stretching up more northward. And I mean, those occasional games from Texas State to Delaware, it's the same thing with Conference USA. They would of course encounter that less than in Conference USA in the Sun Belt, but it's still something that they will have to encounter. So I want to know your thoughts on Delaware to the Sun Belt.
yeah, I mean the Sun Belt definitely at this point doesn't need Delaware as much as CUSA would, and same goes for the MAC. I think the geography is a little bit better. You got Marshall, JMU, ODU, all fairly close. It wouldn't be a terrible travel time for them in the eastern, in the portion of CUSA. There's a couple other teams there that are not too far. They'd have to add in probably another team as well. But I think these conferences, we've seen the super conferences going to 20 teams, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see that with the G5 or mid-major conferences as well. I think they're realizing that they have more bargaining power with a larger conference, even though it's a a bigger pie that's split more ways. I think they're understanding that little bit of extra bargaining power with the networks does mean you might get a little bit more pie. And in addition, I think it gives you a little bit of more assurance against a raid from another conference. If you're at 10 or 12 and you get raided, then you might be looking at dissolution. Whereas if you're at 20, you get raided and lose a couple of teams. It's like, all right, you know, we'll sit tight for at 16 or whatever for a couple of years and see if we can add a few more later.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree. I mean, it. I feel like the name of the game now isn't markets for conference alignment. It's just depth. And I guess all teams are good teams for in terms of depth. As we saw, and those moves can pay off. I know people are clowning Rice for or the American for getting Rice. Um, I mean, there's a joke where it was like empty stands at one of the Rice games last year, and someone goes, "But look at all that market in the background because the Rice Stadium was underneath the Houston skyscrapers." But it paid off. They beat a Big 12 team, so good for the Rice Owls. Have them projected to go to the Frisco Bowl. Should be a fun time. But yeah, like I mean, depth is the name of the game, but I think depth within your footprint is key. That and I will say one thing too. One thing I just thought of. I guess with Conference USA, and there's always like political type of battles in Conference USA or in Conference realignment. It would, adding Delaware would prevent any conflict with Western Kentucky, because I know they are dead set on not having Eastern Kentucky in their conference, which I think any school that blocks another school from joining their conference, I think that's just a soft Bush League move. Um, and you can quote me on that. I mean, I don't want to start beef with Western Kentucky fans because I feel like they want Eastern Kentucky in their conference, but Western Kentucky administrators just do better because that's just Bush League. I'm putting in a lot of bulletin board material. First the Delaware administrators, now Western Kentucky. So not my intention, but it's just coming out.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's all fans probably feel that way, right? Or most. It's like, hey, let's get these guys in conference. Like let's get the rivalries going. I think that's what makes college sports great, makes it more fun. Any sport really, but college sports in particular. The rivalries, the proximity for sure. But I feel like for administrators and maybe even the coaching staff and a lot of places, it's like, hey, no, we want the upper hand. We don't want to be competitive. We want to win. So I get kind of where they're coming from, but I agree with you. I'll echo your sentiments and just say Bush League, Western Kentucky.
Yeah, so thanks for joining me on the bulletin board material. But yeah, I mean that would I mean that kind of makes it more likely because I know Eastern Kentucky's been ready forever. But even then, like I think one of the main things like Western with Eastern Kentucky was like their stadium. Delaware has like an FBS ready stadium as well in terms of capacity. But it's like now that they changed the requirements, it's going to be funny, seeing some of these schools play at some of these stadiums in the FBS. Like I mean, there aren't any examples. Like Kennesaw State plays in a 9,000 seat stadium. Sam Houston's a big one. They have Hawaii, which I know Hawaii's not a blue blood, but the fact that the Warriors would come down from the islands to play in the Houston area, but not against Houston, not against Rice, not against Texas A&M, in a 9,000 seat stadium in Sam Houston, it's college football at its finest, and I don't say that in jest. So that is just a brief, I guess, kind of note on schools moving up.
No doubt.
But yeah, I mean your Penn State Nittany Lions have a a role to play in this whole Delaware thing because they showed that the Blue Hens are not are either the Blue Hens are not FBS ready at all or just Penn State's really good. I'm betting to think the latter though.
Yeah, man. Delaware, they've been up and down a little bit, but they're typically top of the FCS. So, I think it might be a little premature, but you've got to kind of strike when the iron's hot. And if this proposed change to the NCAA regulation comes into play with what was it, the $5 million price tag rather than $5,000, then that's definitely gonna change things. So if you can get it in under the deadline for that, then just kind of let the chips fall where they may and hope to build up from there.
I mean, I think you'll see a lot of rich boosters, SMUing their way into the FBS. I guess call it the SMUization of college sports, where they come out of the woodworks, and it's like, where were these fans when SMU was in the WAC? Uh, you know, you know, fair weather fans. But yeah, but
I
I
guess.
guess yeah, it's. Oh no, what were you saying?
No, I was just say, yeah, get Joe Flacco on the horn, get him to to write a check.
Or Matt Nagy, he's got a long coaching career, so I'm sure he's saved up a lot.
Hope
Um,
so.
yeah, I mean, but I guess that being said as well, this has been. Oh, I guess one last note: the rivalries too, like we mentioned. I mean, I'd be dying to see a Delaware Navy, Delaware Temple rivalry, a classic MAC rivalry in terms of the Middle Atlantic Conference, the real MAC. That's bulletin board material number three. I got to get these clips out on social media just to piss people off. But yeah, so I'd be dying, especially they can sort of manufacture a rivalry with Navy. After last year, a Delaware player saluted the brigade of midshipmen. So there's stuff to work with there. I mean,
For sure, for sure. I mean that whole region there there is rivalry fodder for sure. For sure. Navy, Delaware, Temple, maybe even UMD, you know, it's there needs to be better rivalries. That's what the Northeast and the Mid Atlantic has kind of done wrong about college sports. There's just we got a couple, but the rivalry game needs to be stepped up.
I would agree. And so on that note, I hope Delaware finds a home, gets some of these FBS rivalries going, especially Temple, 36 News and Temple, and Navy too. Would love to see it. But John, do you have anything final to say before we sign off?
Let me just shout out Hampton football again. Mentioned my nephew, but they got the big dub over Howard this weekend. So we found out who the real HU is, and yeah, so yeah, go
Yeah, I
Pirates.
mean, some people aren't going to be happy to hear that, but what a collapse by the Pirates, or not by the Pirates, by the Bison. Definitely an underrated story. If you caught the MEAC tape delay after dark, then you know what I'm talking about. And I know the game was like on ESPNU tape delayed, the traditional weekly MEAC/SWAC game tape delayed at 10:30. Get those games live on those channels though. That's my thoughts. But until next time, everyone. Thanks for joining, and peace, love, and soul.